there are two dimensions to the feminist perspective in Kashmir. One is the one that exists within Kashmir, which is like the women's movement or the women's voices within Kashmir, and the second is the women's perspective outside of Kashmir. I'll deal with the first. I'll deal with the internal situation first. I think the important thing about the women's perspective from within Kashmir is that it has never registered to both within Kashmir, in my opinion, and even outside as a feminist perspective. But it is a feminist perspective. If you look at it from the point of view of it, from the strategies that they devised, the issues that they picked up, it was very much led by women. For instance, the Association for the Parents of Disappeared Persons. This is an association that was initiated by one of the mothers of the disappeared. A young man called Javed Ahangar was picked up and never returned, and his mother, Parveena Ahangar, who was a completely unlettered woman, became the person around whom the Association for the Parents of Disappeared Persons was actually created. She went from court to court, from jail to jail in search of a son, and when she could find no means by which she could get an answer of where he was, she set up this Association for the Parents of Disappeared Persons. Now that grew from Parveena's own son to all the parents and all the brothers and sisters of people who had disappeared, a larger movement. It's a completely non-violent movement. It actually meets once a month and demonstrates. And there is absolutely nobody who pays any attention to this extremely long campaign that has been led by women and very feminist in its understanding, for accountability, for state accountability, for judicial redress. And because it's non-violent, nobody pays any attention to it in a world in which violence and militancy have the dominant voice. In a sense, it parallels Iram Sharmila's long, quiet struggle for the lifting of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act in Manipur, which too, over 10 years has not met with any form of, her hand being stretched. Who's paying attention to that struggle? So in a sense, it seems to me that the feminist perspective is actually, especially when it's non-violent, is doubly marginalized because nobody pays any attention to it. In a sense, I think the questions of how women have struggled in Kashmir and how they have tried to raise issues, and there's been a struggle to try and raise both the issue of women's rights and the issue of democratic rights for all Kashmiris. It's a sort of simultaneous struggle in their minds as well as in their actions. And for instance, there's a young woman I met in 2000 when I went on a fact-finding to Kashmir. This was a young girl who was very keen on becoming a lawyer. The circumstances were really grim. She was studying and was struggling against patriarchy within Kashmiri society. But there was also this larger struggle around democratic rights which she was involved with. But the power of her formulation is something that is captured very well by this one statement that she gives, in which she says that if you don't struggle at all fronts, on all the different oppressions, then actually you don't succeed in struggling against the larger oppressions that people experience. And so her formulation is something I've never forgotten. She said, "Jab chhote zulm katte hain, जब आप छोटे जुल्म को काटोगे तो बड़े जुल्म अपने आप कट जाते हैं." And she was really making a statement about the fact that you had to simultaneously struggle against the patriarchy within Kashmir and, let's say, the kind of situation that a lot of young women faced as women in an area which was under conflict in terms, in a sense, largest context would be the patriarchy of a state outside. So in a very interesting formulation that came. I think they've also had a long struggle to put the questions of sexual violence, which there's been a long history of under the conflict situation. Large numbers of, for over a period of 20 years, the Armed Forces Special Powers Act has been in operation. And one of the things that happens under the Armed Forces Special Powers Act is that under a clause, state, in a sense, all actions under the taken by the army personnel are given a certain impunity, and if you have to move against them in court, you have to seek prior sanction, which of course has to come from the Home Ministry, and which in no case has come. The struggles of the Association of Parents for Disappeared Persons, for instance, is actually something that has struggled constantly against this impunity. So there is and in the context of sexual violence, it is you see sometimes that the army occasionally does a court martial, and does court martial within its own parameters, but does not allow the cases to be registered in the normal structure of courts and judicial redressal. So in a sense, the struggle for acknowledging the peculiarities of what women experience, and it's not, what women experience under a conflict, in a conflict situation, it's not only in the context of, say for instance, children or husbands or brothers who disappear, who are killed in fake encounters, and you never get to know what happened to them. Nor is it only a question of the long series of sexual violences, including last year, the Shopian case, which got completely buried by the CBI report, which said that no rape, no murder had taken place. But nobody in Kashmir believes this, and certainly all the women that we met in Kashmir did not believe this CBI report. So if you look at it from the point of view of what women are experiencing, there are these extremes. But in a fundamental way, there are also other things that that women in Kashmir are experiencing, and that includes the everyday trauma of curfews, of violence, of also the fact that they don't know what is going to happen next. The endemic level of violence is one which means that women are really subjected to very insecure circumstances, and this has meant that women have had to seek counseling, go to, in fact, the worshipping in shrines, and particularly in Sufi shrines, has gone up dramatically, because there is a need for some kind of succor in these hard times. So all that is also something that is sought by women. For instance, now I think this is very movingly captured in that film by Abir Bazaz and Meenu Gaur, which is called Paradise on the River Hell, where he focuses on sections of the margins, that is, older people, young children, and mothers and grandmothers in particular, all of whom experience this kind of great anxiety around the loss of a space and the loss of a culture, loss of a way of living, which was actually something in which they had such a strong level of community sentiment. All of that is also things that people have had to deal with. So in a sense, all this is something that we need to recall when we think about what women in Kashmir are experiencing. So if we see the stone pelting today, in which large numbers of women also came out to stone pelt, we must remember that this is actually the end product of a long period in which people have experienced the degree of violence, which is an extraordinary degree of violence, and then not been able to articulate it in any way, and then it's come out in the form of this kind of anger. So in a sense, we need to see what's happening in Kashmir and what women are experiencing in a long-term way. And we must not actually, therefore, allow the very, let's say, the dramatic way in which the media picks up people like Asya Andrabi as the, as a special kind of voice representing women in Kashmir. She does represent a certain kind of voice, but that doesn't actually incorporate the large numbers of people. For instance, she is someone who is wrapped in that hijab with only her eyes being seen. It's not, whereas in Kashmir they've had a debate around whether they should be wearing the burqa at all, because that was not the history of Kashmir. That was not something that was worn over there. And in fact, early on in the militancy, when somebody, some fringe characters sent out a sort of an order saying women should wear burqas, a group of women wrote back to a letter to their brothers, they called it bhaiyon ke naam chitti, and said, this is not the culture, this is not what we have done in the past. Plus, in these difficult times, are you expecting us to wear burqas and then run when the firing takes place or whatever? So actually there's an internal voice, and an internal voice that has registered an autonomous women's perspective in Kashmir. We don't get to hear of it, and we don't get to know of it, because it's not something that's, it's not something that our media has picked up in any way. I think also when we're talking about the feminist perspective, one should remember that there is a feminist perspective that operates as far as women in India are concerned, and that too is a feminist perspective on the situation in Kashmir. And I regret that the women's movement did not, for a very long period of time, did not actually take a strong position on what was happening in Kashmir. Very early in our history, there was a woman like Mridula Sarabhai who actually did take that kind of position when Sheikh Abdullah was put in jail. She actually, lobbied for the fact that with the parliament that he should either be tried or he should be released, because you can't keep a person like this for X number of years without being charged even. So there was a democratic voice from a woman that came at that stage. But I think women's movement in India lost that voice, and when it resurfaced only when, to an extent, things had got really too bad, both in Kashmir and in other parts of the country. So it seems to me that there's a lot that we need to do, and I just want to end with this anecdote in which I want to illustrate this with this anecdote. Again, on that trip in 2000, when we were fact-finding, there was a young woman who simply wanted to be a doctor, but she couldn't be because the situation was so insecure. And she said, "Halat jab badlenge, tab hum doctory padhenge." And I said, "Halat kab badlenge?" She then looked at me and very straight in the eye, and she said, "Halat tab badlenge jab tum halat ko badloge." And I think she was making a statement about the fact that it's, unless people outside Kashmir also take a stand, also actually voice their opinions around the right for Kashmiris to determine their own futures, as well as for a rule of law and for democratic rights to obtain. I don't think that the Kashmiri situation is something that's going to be solved. But I do believe that the women must play an important role both within Kashmir and outside Kashmir in moving things forward from the kind of, let's say, position in which it's got locked into.